Molly Dubin, and I am the curator of the Jewish Museum Milwaukee. And I am thrilled to be announcing tonight's very exciting program, Cartoons as Commentary. Phil Hands explores the work of Erich Lichtblau-Leskly. And of course, Erich Lichtblau-Leskly is the artist featured in our current exhibit, To Paint is to Live. And Phil also was a extraordinary committee member in helping us to bring this project to fruition. So it's really meaningful on several levels to have Phil with us here this evening. So before I tell you a little bit about Phil, I want to ask for your patience for any technical glitches that might occur this evening. If you have any technical challenges during the talk, we ask that you use the chat feature that is located at the bottom of your screen. If you click that and type in your issue, one of our program team will attempt to assist you. So this is the point in the program where if we were together in a large group, I would ask you to silence your phones. But since we are doing this virtually, I ask that you keep your microphones muted. And again, to submit questions via the chat feature to our presenter. And we are going to have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, but we also will have some breaks during the program while Phil is doing some actual drawing for us. So we'll have some opportunities to engage some questions there as well. So to get the best experience possible from the program this evening, we are going to recommend that you view the program in the speaker view. If you are currently seeing the Brady Bunch style gallery, you can select the speaker view option, which is located in the top right corner of your screen. I know many of you have donated graciously to our programs to not only help support this evening's program, but all of the many programs that we have offered online throughout this past 12 months. And we so appreciate your contributions. We couldn't continue to bring these insightful programs to you without your support. And we will again share a link for donations at the end of the program, should you feel moved to contribute. So with that, let me introduce our speaker for this evening, Phil Hands. Phil is there he is, that dapper man waving in the vest and tie. Phil is the editorial cartoonist for the Wisconsin State Journal in Madison, Wisconsin. He joined the staff of the State Journal in 2013, and he is currently the only cartoonist on the staff of a newspaper in Wisconsin. His cartoons have appeared in USA Today, Newsweek, Time, and the Washington Post. His cartoons are syndicated nationally by Tribune Content Agency. A fierce political moderate, Phil's cartoons attack the extremists on both the left and the right. He learned long ago that no political party has a monopoly on bad ideas. And I think we can all agree with that. Phil has won a number of state and national awards for editorial cartooning and was the 2012 recipient of the Society of Professional Journalists Sigma Delta Chi Award for Editorial Cartooning. Wow. Please help me welcome Phil Hands.
Thanks, everybody. That sounds like a pretty impressive guy. Geez. I haven't really listened to my whole biography read like that. That's kind of cool. Anyway, as they said, I am Phil Hands. I am the editorial cartoonist for the Wisconsin State Journal. I am going to be talking about the amazing work of Erich Lichtblau-Leskly, and I will be sharing my cartoons and my perspective on it as well. Also, we're going to have some breaks for drawing, and if you want to, you can follow along. So I'm going to do some tutorials on how I draw certain politicians. And if you want to get some pencil and paper out or whatever, grab it and we'll do some easy follow alongs, and you can figure out how to draw Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Scott Walker, who knows, right? So let's get started. And I want to thank you all for being here. See if I can figure out, I've got to first of all, I have to share my screen. This is my first time I've actually kind of run a presentation digitally over Zoom. So if it's a disaster, blame me. Let's see here. We all seeing that? Okay, excellent. And there is a way to do this now. Let's see here.
Oh, Phil, you have gotten yourself muted somehow.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Am I good?
Yes.
Okay. So if you don't know who Erich Lichtblau-Leskly is, he is this really impressive, amazing Czech Jewish illustrator, and I would say cartoonist. He was interned in the Trezenstadt concentration camp during World War II. He did these really fascinating, amazing paintings of his time there. He was there for the duration of the entire war. In 1944, towards the end of the war, his wife and he cut up all of the paintings that he had done out of fear that he'd be found out and tortured for the work that he was doing. And so he cut them up, and you can see this is sort of what they ended up looking like in the camps. They cut them up and hit him in the floorboards. After the war, he survived the war and moved to Israel. And later in the 70s and 80s, he turned these really fascinating, he turned his images into these more finished paintings out of watercolor, which I think I really enjoy the original works of art from the camps. I find them really beautiful to look at, and the line work is amazing. But I'm going to be using the work from Israel to sort of discuss what was going on, because it has the text in there that I think is important for discussion, and it's a little more finished. So even though I think just artistically the original work is a lot more compelling, I'm going to be talking about the recreations from Israel. This one's entitled The New Police Order. I learned a lot about the Holocaust and how some of these camps operated from looking into this work and from this work. And so this is the new police order. This is the ghetto police telling this crowd of hungry inmates, please be polite and don't push, as they all struggle to get the food. And you can see, so yeah, this is the final work, and you can tell that he cut off the words and some of the more incriminating parts in the camp. So are his works editorial cartoons? When you think of a political cartoon, you probably think of something that looks like this. This is a great cartoon by this brilliant cartoonist named Phil Hands out of Madison, Wisconsin. Probably think of a cartoon that's got Uncle Sam, maybe the Statue of Liberty. I drew this cartoon shortly after Donald Trump was acquitted for the second time for impeachable offenses. And after this was after the storming of the Capitol building, and this Uncle Sam says they caught the guy, but he got off on a technicality. So you think of cartoons that might have Uncle Sam or the Statue of Liberty. Maybe it's got donkeys and elephants in it, or the presidents, or leaders or caricatures of world leaders. So this is a recent cartoon, A Brief History of Executive Orders. You can see when the Republicans are the president, the Republicans love the executive orders, and the Democrats have the presidency. The Democrats love them. So I love drawing donkeys and elephants in my cartoons a lot too, because a lot of people don't know this, but those are symbols that are used to represent the two parties, and the two parties use them as their mascots and their logos, but they were developed by political cartoonists 100 years ago. As a shorthand for the two parties. And I think it's really cool that part of editorial cartooning history survives today in modern American politics. So I draw a lot of cartoons about this guy nowadays. Looks like that in my cartoons. Sometimes I make him look cool like that in my cartoons. I also drew a lot of cartoons about this guy, unfortunately, for 4 years. He looked more like this in my cartoons. And I would say that there are really three things that are key components to any good editorial cartoon. And I'm going to argue that Erich Lichtblau-Leskly's work clearly illustrates those three things. So first of all, you got to have compelling, beautiful artwork. And boy, does he ever. I mean, just really fascinating to look at. This is the caption on this one is "Every man's dream to be alone in his kumbal," which this is a painting of the barracks at the Trezenstadt concentration camp. The barracks held dozens of inmates, really horrible, wretched conditions. A lucky few. What's interesting about looking at his work is you learn about sort of the society that existed inside of these camps that we don't think about nowadays. There were people that were on the top of the totem pole and the bottom of the totem pole. And some people at the top of the pole, they got to cut out a little place in the rafters. That was living it up in the concentration camp. Was they would stake out a place in the rafters, nail together some planks of wood and have what's called a kumbal in the rafters up there. And that was everyone's dream, was to live in those, have that secluded little space. So I found that really interesting, and I love this artwork, and I love the beautiful painting. I will say I noticed that in his recreations from Israel, it seems like it's always snowing in Trezenstadt, and maybe that's because when you've moved to Israel, everything seems cold about the rest of the world. Or it was a cold, dark time, but it seems like it's always snowing in these Israeli recreations. So it's gotta be compelling artwork. Second of all, I think a good cartoon doesn't always have to be, but humor is a really key component to good cartoons. And a lot of this artwork, despite the fact that it's drawn in a Nazi concentration camp, is just funny to look at. So this is Die Operette in 3 Akten, Das Ghetto-Mädel. I will say, I took German for all of the text here is in German. I took German for 4 years in high school. I'm really embarrassed with how little German I actually remember and how bad I am at saying all of these things. And I was using Google Translate left and right to try and figure out what these texts were saying. And so if my translation is a little bit off, please say so in the chat and let me know, and I'll try to address it at some point. But this is the Ghetto, an operetta for the Ghetto Girl. And Trezenstadt as a concentration camp was a little bit different. They tried to highlight that there were cultural and societal activities available to the prisoners there. But something about these two seemingly really elderly people doing this song and dance, I think he found it ridiculous, and I found it a little ridiculous too. So humorous artwork from a concentration camp. Who would have thunk it, right? But it really does exist. And then finally, and this goes without saying, a really good editorial cartoon must have a strong opinion. And a lot of Leskly's work is very opinionated and really shows his feelings about what's going on at the time. I will say that that's one of the greatest misconceptions about what political cartoonists do, is that a lot of people think we're just drawing funny pictures about the news, which is not what we do. I like to think of myself as a columnist that you might see in the newspaper, except instead of writing, I draw. So instead of writing hundreds of words that nobody reads, I draw compelling pictures that everyone sees, is the way I like to say it. But you can see the strong opinions in Leskly's work, such as this one. This is anti-Semites, Jews in the ghetto. And so there was a hierarchy. There were people that ratted on their neighbors and snitched on people. And this is Leskly's depiction of them. They're fouling their own nest. And this is actually the original work from Trezenstadt. I thought it was interesting to see it's titled Jewish Anti-Semites in the Ghetto. When he went back to Israel, he added the cage to the image, which I think actually makes it a lot stronger. We are, not only you're in the nest, but you're stuck in a cage in the nest. Don't mess it up. And I think that's just shows how strongly opinionated a lot of these pieces are. And this could be an editor. We would see this in a newspaper and say, well, that's a political cartoon right there, because we see that kind of imagery on a regular basis. Like that's a political cartoon right there. We would say this cartoon of Donald Trump escaping impeachment for the first time, that's a political cartoon. Okay, and so what else do we have? But not all that I do as a political cartoonist is necessarily about politics. It's not just addressing the most powerful in society. Sometimes I'm just talking about everyday life in society. And sometimes my everyday life in society is living in Wisconsin in the wintertime. So here's just an observation about the world around me. The weather hits 10 degrees outside, and there's some guy walking down my street with shorts on. So this is winter in Wisconsin. Whoa, looks like we cracked double digits today. And there's neighborhood shorts guy walking his corgi. You'll notice that every time I draw somebody walking a dog, it is a corgi because I'm obsessed with corgi dogs. Do not have one. I wish I did. If I had a corgi, it'd be named Calvin. Thank you very much for asking. Let's see here. But so my life is from Wisconsin, very comfortable, except for the cold winters. But, I think Leskly's doing something very similar in his own environment, which was the horrors of a concentration camp. But he's finding real absurdity and almost some silliness in it. This one is, the caption says that excluded from transportation to the east or deportation to the east. And it also says this person, sometimes yellow fever strikes at just the right moment. This person was on the stretcher, was about to be deported to one of the death camps in Poland, but luckily he's too sick to travel. He's got scarlet fever and can't go. Or unfortunately, he can't go because he's too sick to travel because he got scarlet fever. Anyway, there's this catch-22 element to it of a lot of Leskly's work, which I find really sort of fascinating, but it shows that he's still finding this situation, which is dire and horrible. He's still finding the frivolity and the absurdity in the whole thing. I will say, during the opening, we got the joy of listening to Leskly's daughter speak about her father's experience and talking about his time in the camps. He didn't talk about it very much, but he talks about how she at least imparted that he didn't even realize the danger and peril he was in, because you're just in this mindset of survive the day, and I think you can see that in his artwork. It's very much in the moment, what's going on at the moment, like the moment in the bathroom. This is at the latrine. Rumors from the front line from latrine B4 is the caption, and it's what life was like going to the bathroom in the camp. And I do speak enough German to read the poster, which we should have up at every elementary school in America, which is, it says, nach dem Kacken vor dem Essen Hände waschen nicht vergessen, which means after you've pooped, before you eat, don't forget to wash your hands. So he did quite a few images about diseases in the camps. This is Trezenstadt. I'm not sure how to pronounce that exactly, but I think that was what they called the general diarrhea that went around the camp on a consistent basis. And this is a guy running to the bathroom as fast as he can. I do find the lightning bolts coming out of his head a very accurate visual depiction of what that must feel like, the lightning bolts coming out of your head. Here's another image of diseases in the camp. This is encephalitis. With the blurry fingers and the headaches. I thought this was a really fascinating image. And then the next one, this poor guy's got impetigo. But I will say, when I saw this image, I thought, that guy looks like somebody that I know from my cartoons. This guy and this I hate to say it, but this guy looks just like Scott Walker, the way I would draw him in my old editorial cartoons. So I thought we'd take a quick little drawing break, and I'll show you guys how I would draw Scott Walker. Well, that's how I would draw Scott Walker, first of all. So this is a hole so big you could drive a high-speed train through it. And then I would also, this was one of the last cartoons I drew about Scott Walker. Democrats are driven by anger and hatred. No, we are not, you stupid bleeping moron. And so I was going to just show you real quick how I draw Scott Walker, and then you guys can follow along too on that as well. So I pull up my screen. You guys are seeing this? Okay. The beauty of technology is amazing. I draw all of my cartoons digitally nowadays, so this is pretty standard for me. It was a little bit weird at first, but I think I've gotten the hang of it. So Scott Walker, when I draw him, I'm going to draw him first, and then I'll show you guys how to go about doing Scott Walker. I just make sure he's got a big hump on the side of his face there. He's kind of got I'm not sure what shape that is for a head, but that's what shape his head is. And he's got a little chin, a very small chin. It's a very weak chin. Got a very bulbous nose. And he's got it. You got to give him the kind of the lazy, dopey eyes. That was very key to the 8 years of Walker was lazy eyes. I was actually really honored. There's a really fantastic cartoonist by the name of Steve Sack, and he was telling me he's from Minneapolis, and he started drawing Scott Walker because Scott Walker ran for president, became a national figure. And Steve Sack started drawing Scott Walker, and he said he never figured out how to draw him until he saw my cartoons on him, which I thought was just kind of the highest praise I've ever gotten. And the key thing with Scott Walker is you got to make sure you leave a nice big bald spot right there because he's self-conscious about it. So it's really important to leave it there. He actually told me in an editorial board meeting that the bald spot is not nail pattern baldness. He hit his head in a cabinet and the hair just won't grow back there anymore. I think that's entirely BS, but that's what he says. So that's how I draw Scott Walker. Now, if you want to learn how to draw him yourself, here's the technique to do it, okay? And I'll try and keep it simple. But he starts off like the shape of a pill, okay? Because he's a bit of a pill. And then you do a triangle that goes all the way through it, like that. And then at the bottom of this triangle, I'm just going to turn this into a tie. See how that turns into a tie for him? There we go. See this line that goes through the middle here? We're going to turn those into two dopey eyes. And then we're going to give him some eyebrows. We are going to come down here, halfway down the middle, and then just do his dopey nose. We're going to go to this bottom of this line here. That was the circle. We're going to go to the top of it. And there's his dopey mouth, little chin. And then you just add the hair on each side. Make sure you leave a plenty big bald spot. And there you've drawn Scott Walker. Okay. Pretty silly, huh? Don't worry, there's more. Anyway, I was also, so now let's go back and see, let's see here. Okay, so back to a real artist, Leskly. Here's another interesting image from him. I liked this one a lot. It's again gets at the what's going on in the societies of the camp and the hierarchy. This is room elders are mean thieves, and a room elder was somebody who was supposed to be in charge of the barracks and keep order, but occasionally it looks like they would take more than their fair share of food. And I thought this was a really interesting depiction of that situation going on. I also think it's really interesting, and here Phil gets philosophical for a second. I think if we looked at this artwork without knowing who did it, when it was drawn, and where it was drawn, we would look at some of his depictions of Jewish people and say, wow, that's really anti-Semitic. You know, some of these people have large noses, the eyebrows, and especially people where he's being critical of people like the bird in the cage and this guy right here. You know, the depictions I feel like are falling into some of those tropes of anti-Semitism, and I think that really speaks to, and maybe this isn't okay to, maybe people don't like when people say this, but he's really a product of his times. I think if we lived in 1930s, 1940s Europe, that is the way Jews were depicted in pop culture, you know, unfortunately, and that's the way he felt like he needed to depict people so that people understood who they were. I think there's something similar going on with the next guy, Dr. Seuss. You know, I think it's fine that the Seuss company decided that some of the work that he did was inappropriate and offensive, and the depictions, have you seen some of those depictions that in those books that they decided not to publish anymore? They are clearly offensive. and racist. But we have to remember that Dr. Seuss is also the guy that created the Sneetches, which is clearly an allegory to the treatment of, allegory of not only African Americans but Jews with the stars on the bellies. And so Dr. Seuss was way ahead of his time for being understanding that racism was bad, but even he was a product of his times when it comes to racism. So I think we have to be very careful about how we look at work, and I just think we need to acknowledge that people drawing Jewish people in the 1940s were going to do it in a way we think is inappropriate nowadays. I think, and I think that's just the way it is. But I think Erich Lichtblau-Leskly could also be really show some humanity in his drawings too. It wasn't just ugly caricatures. I feel like these three characters in this image are probably all individual people. These were probably people from the camps, and these are sort of these little caricatures of those particular people, which I think is really cool. This is image entitled "You Can See Right Through the Stomachs," and I believe it's the men digging through their belongings to try and find the food they'd hidden so that the SS wouldn't steal it from them. Hunger seemed like a constant problem in these facilities. It's not like people were always hungry. This is entitled "The Coffin Factory," and this is another example of Leskly finding absurdity and maybe even a bit of humor in the life at the camp. There was a coffin factory, which is morbid that they needed such a place, but the coffin factory was where you went to get the best firewood. The leftover wood from the coffin factory had the best firewood to keep you warm, to keep you from going to the coffin factory in the end. So I find that really interesting, and I find the work bizarrely humorous. And I also noticed that it's snowing in the background again. Trezenstadt was a lot different than several other of the camps that existed. It was the place that I think the Nazis paraded it around as sort of a model camp, and the Red Cross at one point visited, and Lichtblau-Leskly sort of had a field day with this because it was ridiculous that they cleaned up and basically beautified this camp, which was a horrible place to make it look presentable for the Red Cross. So this is all the sidewalks will be scrubbed, and you can see a woman scrubbing the sidewalks. And somebody was in another discussion about these images. Somebody explained that the yellow armband with the 3 dots suggests that this person was blind, and that so by scrubbing the sidewalks, they've just made it a lot more dangerous for this blind man to walk around, and slip on stuff. So I think he's again pointing out just how ridiculous and silly everything was in this time. And here's another image from cleaning up the camps for the Red Cross. Everything will be beautified and decorated. And this is a dentist office that I don't think really existed, that they sort of put it up as a fake dentist office to make it look like there was a dentist office. And I do like that the sign in the dental office, and my German's not perfect, but I think it's a threat. It says "Halte den Mund und deine Zähne gesund," which I believe means keep your mouth shut and you'll have healthy teeth, because we won't knock them out, is the implication. And so everywhere there's reminders, and I think he's just sort of pointing out everywhere there's this reminder and threat of just the peril that you're perpetually in, which I find, but it's done in such a whimsical way almost, which I think really shines a different perspective on our understanding of certain aspects of what life was like in these camps. So this is an image about the ghetto basically the ghetto police. There were police in the ghetto that were Jews, and they signed up for it, usually younger people. And for lots of people, it was a way to avoid stricter punishment, such as protection from deportation to Poland, is what this one's about. But this one says, one of the slogans of the Dr. Lowenstein, who I believe was the head of the ghetto police, said, "Protection from deportation to Poland is not a free gift." And so in this image, I think Leskly's being rather sympathetic to somebody who wasn't always a sympathetic character in the camps. These police who were, you know, keeping order and oftentimes ratting out their fellow inmates. But you can see this person freezing on top of a parapet, and so you can see Leskly's seeing the humanity in somebody who maybe he feels is sort of a threat at some point to him, which I find really interesting and fascinating. And I find this imagery very familiar. It's something that I've used in my cartoons, something exactly like this, except it's always about weather in Wisconsin in my cartoons, apparently. This is a Game of Thrones reference. Winter is coming. Actually, this is pretty normal for April in Wisconsin. I just love the guy in the bicycle in this cartoon. Just silly. And now this is, artistically, I find this just really beautiful, and I'm totally going to steal this. The caption on this one is "Not enough water for so many ghetto inmates," and you can see just the drip, 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 and as all the guys try and get their heads underneath the water. The next image is similar too. This is the lunch meal, and it's all the women getting their heads as close to they can to the food as they heat their food up on a little stove in the camp. And they all got their somebody, you know, their hair's all nicely done up. I just love the way the heads and the hands, because that's what's really expressive, and that's what we need to see. That's all he draws. You know, he doesn't draw the rest of the bodies, not because he doesn't have time or because he doesn't want to. It's because this is what you need to see to get the point across. And I'm going to do that in the future, because I've done way too many cartoons that sort of look like this, where I've got too much body parts in the cartoons. This is a cartoon I did about COVID and people in bars during COVID-19 and why leadership matters. And there's Trump's at one point said the virus will probably get worse before it gets better. And I can imagine people in the bar saying, wait, so it's not a hoax. But I think in the future, I'm just going to draw a bunch of discombobulated heads all over the bar, just like Leskly would do. Very cool. And here's another image about life in the camp. This one's entitled "Because the Doctors Are Also Hungry, a Cook is Always Prioritized." And so the camp had a medical facility. The doctors were also Jewish and also had sort of limited rations and were always hungry. And so if the cook who had some access to food was in line, well, he always got the best treatment. And again, you can see, I think it's interesting. I don't know why, but this guy at the end of the bench looks like Scott Walker to me. Maybe I'm just obsessed with Scott Walker, but he does. And then both the cook and the doctor here, there's some pretty, not the most flattering depiction of them, and hook noses and some of the stereotypes that are sort of ugly nowadays in this depiction here. Now I've definitely. I like to draw a good doctor too sometimes. So this is a recent cartoon I did that featured Dr. Biden and Dr. Mitch McConnell about the Senate filibuster clogging up the valves to the heart. And Dr. Biden says, "I'm a little concerned about this serious blockage." Uncle Sam says, "Can I get a second opinion?" And Dr. McConnell says, "It's the only thing keeping you alive." So drawing doctors is fun sometimes. I guess I've drawn Dr. McConnell a couple of times. This was during the Obamacare debate. And Paul Ryan tells Donald Trump, "I'm sorry, we did everything we could, but unfortunately, it looks like he's gonna make it." And there's Barack Obama back in the room, looking very happy and excited in the operating room. Here's an image of the light control. The inmate reading at night, and I imagine he's being told that he's got to turn his light off. I couldn't read all of the. I think there's something about illegal strobe lights there. I just like the image. I thought it was really quite pretty, and it reminded me of a cartoon I'd done recently, which was the light at the end of the tunnel with kids running back to school, which I thought was sort of an interesting image. My kids are back in school; they love it. And this is I thought just in terms of artistry, just really quite beautiful. This is the dream. Or a dream, but it's actually a mirage. And this is somebody in the camp dreaming of someday going to Israel and the Holy Land and escaping this hell on earth, which Leskly was, I think he would tell you he was fortunate enough to be able to do that. And so many people he knew didn't have that chance, just so tragically. But I find this work of art very compelling. And it's something that I like the technique of the dream as an image, as in sort of a thought balloon. It's something that I've done in my cartoons in the past. I think it's just really, really fascinating and wonderful. And now I think I'll take another drawing break before I talk about some of my cartoons that I've drawn recently. I don't know if there's any questions that somebody wanted to ask during this next drawing break. I need to take breaks from drawing because I just can't talk all that much. So if anybody had a question, I'd be happy to field it. But I was going to show you how I go about drawing Joe Biden and then do a little Joe Biden demonstration for you. Wait a minute, I got to share the screen. Otherwise, you can't see what I'm doing. Hold on a sec.
The fact that you are simultaneously talking and drawing is impressive in itself. So
well, thank you.
I'm waiting for you to start chewing bubble gum, and then we'll know. You just have
that would make it difficult. Okay, so Joe Biden, good old crazy Uncle Joe, right? So I like to, when I draw Joe Biden, I like to start with the smile because his most defining feature. It lights up a room the same way that like a high beam headlights do. I'm not sure I gave myself enough room here. This is the problem of cartooning digitally, is sometimes you don't give yourself enough room for everything. Anyway.
So Phil, while you're drawing, I think we have a couple questions coming in here.
Absolutely. I'd love to answer a question.
So I'm thinking these are regarding Erich Lichtblau-Leskly's work, and correct me if I'm wrong. So one of the questions here is, where did the artist get colors in the camp? So Leskly,
I actually don't know.
So Leskly, who didn't identify himself initially as an artist, because the thought was, if I can't do physical labor, I'm not going to be kept around. So he wound up, he first was put to work doing physical labor, but he wound up eventually being in some type of a propaganda design department, not just propaganda, but also, as Phil mentioned earlier, Trezenstadt did have a bit of permitted culture there in terms of arts or performance. So that was where Leskly wound up working, and he did have access to some materials then that other prisoners wouldn't have had access to. And it was very simplistic. There was a question about the color being added later. Those that were created while he was imprisoned, that was simultaneous. The drawing, which was done with colored pencil and some with watercolor, that the later works that we have on exhibit, which were created in the early 70s in Israel, again, color was simultaneous and quite a bit more watercolor, but didn't really advance much in terms of using maybe more materials that would be more expensive, because they were still also struggling, didn't have a lot of money, and that was what he could afford to continue doing his work.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and I like the color palette from the camps in terms of just visually. It's a little bit muted, and I feel like it does sort of set a nice mood for the artwork. Switching gears, I guess. Do you guys want to do a follow? If you guys want to follow along and draw Joe Biden, I'm happy to show you here. He's got a square head to start off with, and then the lower part of his head is going to be a triangle, like that. And then I do another rectangle right here, make sure it's crooked because his smile is crooked, and that's going to be his teeth. A lip, a chin, little upside down triangle for a nose. He's got two little beady eyes, kind of some crazy eyebrows, and then just some hair on each side of his face and a little hair on top. And that's Joe Biden. And if you want to make him cool, You just add the sunglasses. Are there any other questions right now, or should I?
Yeah, we
some
do
of my
have
recent
a few
cartoons?
more. Some are kind of some speaking to Erich Lichtblau-Leskly, some definitely directed to you. So I will answer. There's a question about whether there is a book available, and yes, there is. I believe Cassie may have already provided a link to that book. They Shall Be Counted. It's an incredible book. It includes all the work that we have at the Jewish Museum, and in fact, the entire body of work that belongs to the Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles. Question, do we know if this artist also did commissioned work for officials in the camp? I assume we're speaking to a little bit reminiscent of some of the photographs that we had that many are familiar with. Sometimes the Nazis took advantage of whatever skill they had in the camps. For the exhibit that we had, The Girl in the Diary, we exhibited a number of photographs that were taken by two Jewish individuals who were prisoners, who both were charged with documenting and doing some, more propagandistic kind of compositions, but also were taking photographs clandestinely. No, Erich Lichtblau-Leskly was not commissioned. He was really not charged with doing things officially. His artwork was really done clandestinely for himself as a means of survival, documentation, catharsis, all of those things. So Phil, do you want to speak to this, and then we'll come back into some questions?
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, I find the most fascinating thing about his work is just the, as I've said this before, is that especially people like me. I'm not Jewish. I don't have family that was subjected to the horrors of the Holocaust. All I know, it was really bad. It was horrible. And to me, it's interesting to see the nuance in his work and finding some moments of levity, and you realize that, like, people lived lives. They were wretched conditions, but people are really resilient and they lived their lives there, I think. And his drawings really depict that life in a way I'm not sure I've ever seen before. That really hard life of surviving a concentration camp, and people were cracking jokes and getting through the day, and his artwork shows that in a way I've never seen before, which is why I find it so fascinating.
So I know we want to talk about Bernie here.
Oh, we want to talk about these guys. Okay, yeah. Anyway, I'll just share some of my cartoons. People are welcome to ask questions if they like along the way. Anyway, these are the grumpiest old men. I'm leading a political movement. I did find it fascinating when the Democrats, the party of liberals and young people and diversity, the two choices we had were two really old white guys. So these are the grumpy old men. I'm leading a political movement. Nobody cares, Bernie. My Joe Biden section, political primer for progressives. This is my thoughts about Joe Biden. Cons: he's not liberal enough, not a fan of Medicare for all, not a fan of free tuition, not a pacifist, not woke, not articulate, not coherent, not an outsider, not a woman, not a person of color, not young, not respectful of women's personal space. Pros: not Trump. I thought this was my favorite cartoon I did in all of 2020. This was The Average Joe. He's not exciting or inspiring. He's pretty boring. Boring sounds great after the 24/7 Trumpster fire. Biden's, he had all these people voting for him: moderates, blacks, never Trumpers, college educated, working class people, unions. And Uncle Sam says, "Wow, that's quite the coalition you've stitched together." Well, he did most of the work, pointing to Igor Trump. And then, this was just a fun cartoon because this was what Making America Great Again was to me. Joe Biden get inaugurated. It's really hard to draw the U.S. Capitol building, by the way. And then I seem to use that Making America Great Again phrase a lot nowadays. So this was after the riots on January 6th, the janitors cleaning up. So this is making America great again. And then I kind of foresaw how things might go through the Trump administration. This was the first cartoon I did about Donald Trump. Did it on election night. It was a long night in 2016. And this is George Washington saying, "There goes the neighborhood." People have probably seen this image, but this is my personal experience with people saying, you know, "Phil, you have to stop disrespecting the office of the president." And I'd say, "I'll stop when he stops." That's my desk. If you look very closely in the background, you can see my kids. That's the fun thing about drawing yourself in a cartoon. This is Robert Mueller talking about the Mueller report and his press conference, which I read between the lines, and this is what he said. He said, "If we had meant the president was exonerated, we would have actually said so. Congress should hold him accountable," which means impeach. I like that cartoon. Of course, the president caused lots of problems over the years, like, Stormy Daniels, "Daddy, what did the president do with that weather lady?" It's an awkward question. This was one of the cartoons I really enjoyed from several years ago back. People, I think, rightly criticized, Barack Obama for being outplayed by Putin sometimes. So this is, they'd say he was playing checkers and Putin was playing chess. So this is playing the foreign policy game. Obama says, "King me." Putin says, "Checkmate," and Donald Trump says, "Scissors." This cartoon got a lot of people really angry. I did this one after Charlottesville. Barack Obama inspired many young Americans. So has Trump, unfortunately. And lots of people did like Trump's Supreme Court picks. Trump ponders his Supreme Court pick, but they're all so moderate with Darth Vader, Voldemort, and Maleficent. I always like to draw Darth Vader given the opportunity. I think Trump was really brought down. I think his presidency really failed from his inability to properly tackle the coronavirus. He was still gallivanting all over the country while the virus was spreading. So like in this case, he thought his rallies were really helping. He said, "My rallies are really firing up voters. Every place I visit turns bright red. Those are COVID hotspots in Wisconsin." And then, of course, I think this will be Trump's legacy. "Thanks to my leadership, we are putting America first in COVID deaths." So anyway, that's my Trump area of cartoons. And I was going to show you guys how to, I know it's not the most pleasant thing to do, but I like drawing Trump. And I don't get to do it very much anymore. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to do it right now. And if there's any more questions, I'm happy to field them while I draw this next image.
We definitely have some more questions here. And
Absolutely.
I just have to ask a question here. Do you always, just because I'm noticing, do you always start with a triangle to help you gauge how you compose a face?
Not always. I do that because I think it's helpful. I mean, you can break anything down into simple shapes. And so I think a triangle is a very versatile shape, and I use that because it looks like a head, but it's not always just a triangle.
I'm just, yeah,
Yes, I'd love to. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. It just obviously clearly, sets up, well, yes, I want the eyes to go here, or the nose should be, below. That seems like a helpful guide.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And yeah, you can create anything out of shapes, and yeah, I find the shape of the triangle useful. So, are there any more questions?
Yeah. Yes.
About anything?
While you're getting Trump drawn out here, so this kind of goes to at the top of the presentation. You were talking about, what makes something, is it a political cartoon? We talk about kind of social cartoons, social commentary cartoons. So the question is, do you consider Leskly's art to be editorial? Are they editorial cartoons?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They are editorial cartoons. I use the term editorial cartoon and political cartoon almost interchangeably. I guess an editorial cartoon is anytime an editorial cartoonist is drawing something that's not about politics, maybe, I don't know. But definitely his work is absolutely an editorial. It's not just a social, I mean, I guess you could call it just a social commentary if you want to. I feel like that doesn't really, give it the justice that it deserves. Maybe it does, but I mean, clearly there are elements where he's criticizing leadership in his facilities, and he's showing you what life is like for everyday people in a way that we haven't seen before. That's what I find so fascinating about his work. But I think they're definitely editorial cartoons. I'd sign him up for membership in the American Association of Editorial Cartoonists if possible.
Excellent. So here's an interesting question while you're drawing Trump. Do you approach drawing women differently than you draw men?
Yes, I try not to make them look as ugly as I do men. No, seriously, I actually have a hard time drawing women. I think that's because it's my experience doing a lot of political cartoons, which is it is a male-dominated world of politics. And so, yeah, I end up drawing a lot of, quite frankly, I'm really good at drawing old, angry white men. It's something that there's a lot of in politics. Other things that aren't angry old white men aren't as natural for me, and I struggle more with it. Believe it or not.
Interesting. So here's a question. So this says wanting to know what your education was to become a cartoonist.
Oh, well, so I went to a liberal arts college in Ohio called Kenyon College, and I studied political science and art there, so sort of a little bit of both. And then afterwards, I came to UW-Madison and got a master's degree in journalism. So I kind of got educationally, I got all the bases covered. But as far as I know, I am the only political cartoonist that I know personally with a master's degree in journalism. It's not a requirement.
Do you think that's helpful? Is that an impediment or is that a benefit?
What, to have a master's degree in journalism?
Because it's kind of interesting because you're coming at it from, two sides of a coin, if you will. Do you find yourself more, getting more cerebral, looking more in depth, maybe approaching things different than other collegial cartoonists?
Well, I like to think that I like to think that really good editorial cartoons are very cerebral, and you're trying. I mean, the whole thing about doing a cartoon, especially a lot of editorial cartoons, which a little bit different than some of the stuff that Leskly was doing, with maybe the exception of the I'm thinking specifically of the image of the person fouling the nest. But we're doing a lot of metaphors, and we're trying to think of editorial cartoons. We're trying to think of visual ways to express complex ideas. And so there's a lot of complex thinking that goes behind what ends up looking like a relatively simple image when it's all said and done. But the simplicity is what, I always want, somebody once told me that I was deceptively simple in my artwork, and I found it to be a very good compliment. There's a lot, I try to have a lot packed into a simple message. And I think that's what really good cartoonists do, and I think Leskly was doing that a lot in his images, especially some of the the images like the Coffin Factory is the best place to get firewood. There's you got to think about that for a little while.
Mm-hmm. So this is an interesting question. Have you ever been censured?
Yeah, I want to say it was pretty recently. I mean, I get edited on a very consistent basis. My editor tells me that something isn't appropriate or good. I mean, so for instance, today I was drawing an editorial cartoon about the fact that we've had 2 mass shootings in the last 2 weeks, and I had people walking past a crime scene that I wanted to be a mass shooting, and my editor made me take all the dead bodies out of it because he thought that was inappropriate for the family newspaper. So that happens on a pretty consistent basis. And I think that's probably just editing as opposed to censure. But
right, so censoring, which is kind of an interesting thing when you think about the artist's role and what they're trying to do with the commentary, and maybe something that you're up against working for a newspaper or a publication that that someone like Erich Lichtblau-Leskly wouldn't have had to contend
Yeah.
with.
Yeah, I mean, my editor's not crazy about me drawing people sitting on the can in the bathroom. It's a family newspaper, I'm told, on a regular basis. So I couldn't have gotten away with that one. But yeah, there are decisions that are made at all of these junctures. So is there see, I can go back, and I was going to show you guys, do you guys want to follow along on doing a Trump drawing? Is that something anybody wants to do?
I think we have some nodding heads in the audience. Yes.
Okay, I'll do that real quick. I'll start this over again real quick, and we can. My son likes this one. Well, he used to like this one. Now he's a little too cool for school. But so Trump just starts off big square. You do these. That's his jowls right there. Three little humps. The eyes, just do 2 arrows pointing in on each other. The nose is not important. I just make it sort of small. Actually, you can just do a square, actually, if you want to. That's fine for a Trump nose. And then the mouth, just a little square. Close that part off. Darken that up at the bottom. 3 little lines at the bottom. And then like to do the cheekbones on the side. Some little Nike swooshes for eyebrows. And then a big swooshy hair. And a little bit of hair on the side, a little bit of hair on the side. And if you want to draw hands, make sure you make them really, really small. That's the one trick.
Yeah, there was definitely a comment about that in the chat there, the hilarity of the small hands.
Well, there's a reason we do that as cartoonists. I can tell you the backstory on the small hands. I think it started with people like to say, it was an attempted dig by Marco Rubio to say that Trump had small hands. You know what they say about people with small hands, which if it had just been Rubio saying, making a really crude dig at the president, I wouldn't do it. But the fact is that the next day, Donald Trump got up on the debate stage and said, I got very big hands, no complaints from the ladies ever, just utter sleaze from that guy on that when it came to the hands. So the hands are something I stuck to.
And I assume too, it becomes a little bit of a shorthand. I mean, not to use the term hand again, but a little bit of a visual vocabulary, if you will. That once you start drawing and there's a recognition of what that symbolizes, that's a shorthand in those cartoons moving forward.
Or in that case, just a small hand.
Right, just a small hand.
I like using the double. I like saying it twice. I thought I'd draw our governor real quick, because I do draw him from time to time. I drew him as a hippie once. That was fun.
So while you're drawing that, I want to revisit. We started out kind of talking a little bit about people being a product of their times, and in terms of the depiction and some of the stereotypes and using identifiable tropes, which I think is so interesting. We look at that now in terms of certainly looking at Dr. Seuss and looking back on some of those cartoons, and yes, now we're finding that offensive, but so much of that was because these people were a product of their time, but they were also kind of ubiquitous tropes. So it helped in their being universally understood. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's exactly why it was being done. Because I think people it makes somebody instantly recognizable in a way that they might not otherwise be recognizable. And I think that's why they're doing it. I think you hit the nail right on the head there. And it's unfortunate, but I think that's just the way the world is. And I think the sooner we understand that I don't want to excuse the atrocities of the past. You never want to do that. But I think we always have to understand that people sometimes are a product of the times that they live in a way that I think we sometimes forget that.
Yeah. And certainly if, one of Erich Lichtblau-Leskly's aims was to communicate to the outside world what was going on and had to do it quickly, there had to be some kind of universal shorthands for that comprehension. So I think, yeah, building off of some of those tropes, while not, can make us uncomfortable, it was a quick means of communication because we knew it was understood.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think that's absolutely right. I did, I mean, that was one of the first things I noticed when I started looking at the works, like, wow, you couldn't, if I had drawn that exact image today, people be coming after me for it, but that's because it's today and I know better.
Do you also think, and we know that Erich Lichtblau-Leskly had a background in commercial design and advertising, and doing window dressings. Do you think that's reflected in his approach?
I think some of the images, yeah, I mean, especially I'm thinking of particularly, and I can show it real quick, the image of the women,
Yeah.
the women at the lunch counter. Yeah, that one in particular, I feel like, you can definitely see these look like models, Where is it? I got it. Trust me, there it is.
There it is. Right.
So yeah, I think these definitely look like almost glamorous models, and I think that does come through on a couple of other images. Yeah.
It is. It's really. It's quite fascinating. So we've had a lot of questions throughout. If there are more questions in that you want to throw in the chat, our executive director thanks you for your presentation and wants to tell you that her Trump drawing is the best. So,
oh, good. Can I see? Can somebody hold up a Trump drawing for me?
Yeah, if anybody in the audience has done a Trump drawing and they want to hold that up to share, feel free.
When I speak, I will say that I used to, when I speak a lot at like elementary schools or middle schools. Kindergartners draw the best Barack Obamas. Something about the way they draw Barack Obama is just fascinating. And everyone draws a good Trump.
Wow. Well, this has been just fascinating. I've learned so much just from listening to you, but from also watching you and your techniques. So I just have to ask too, before we kind of, while we're waiting to see if there's any more questions before we kind of wrap up here, how long does it take you from the time you conceive of an idea to the final work? How long does it take you?
A wise editorial cartoonist once told me, when a publisher asks how long it takes to draw a cartoon, you say 8 hours every single day. Don't tell my publisher this, but I can probably finish a drawing in about an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Wow. And how many do you do? How many do you do in a week or a month? Or
I do probably 5 or 6 a week.
Quite
depending on the week.
Quite
and some of it, I draw a separate comic strip for the newspaper. That takes some time. I draw I draw the weekly caption contest, and I'll do some illustrations for the sports desk as well. So it depends on the week, but there's a lot of drawing.
Draw Molly as a cartoon. No, thank you. I would just be hair. It would just be hair. That's all you'd have to do. A lot of thank yous here, and I want to echo that. This has been just fantastic, Phil. Really getting some nice. We all, owe so much to you and what you do, and there being that you're the only one left on a, on a newspaper staff here in Wisconsin. We really are so fortunate to have you, and it's just amazing to be able to get insight into your world and how you create them. So thank you so very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. And you were a great audience. I don't know why I'm not usually nervous about public speaking, but I was really nervous I think the daunting task of being on Zoom and not being able to see people really it was a little bit nerve-wracking. But thanks for being a good audience and the good questions. I really appreciate it.
So thanks to our audience for tuning in and being with us. And thank you for those who have contributed to support tonight's program and other of our online content. And again, if you feel like you would like to help support the programming we do, we welcome that. I do want to mention before we completely wrap up with Phil, a couple of programs that we have coming up. On Tuesday, April 6th, at noon, we're going to be continuing our Global Museum Passport Virtual Home Edition series, where we'll be going to the warmer climate of Tucson. We'll visit our friends at the Tucson Jewish History Museum and Holocaust History Center. We'll be looking at a changing exhibit that they have right now that's called Asylum or Asilo, which really weaves the dialogue from personal stories and histories of individuals who have fled horrific circumstances in their home countries, only to face an asylum system on the US-Mexico border that has turned into chaos by the government's own making. So very timely. And we're also going to be looking at an installation by our good friend, Argentinian Jewish artist, Mirta Kupfermink, who's done an interesting sukkah. So lots of things to see there. And on Thursday, excuse me, no, that's not right. Cassie, tell me our LOMED date, if you wouldn't mind.
It is April 8th, and Molly, you are muted suddenly.
There I am. April 8th. Thank you. Thursday, April 8th, we're going to have the LOMED Book Club, and that's going to be another collaboration with our good friends at the Center for Jewish History. And we are going to be looking at the book Caste. So Caste is the Pulitzer Prize winning best-selling book by author Isabel Wilkerson, who examines the unspoken caste system that has shaped America and shows how our daily lives today are still defined by a hierarchy of human division. So some very thought-provoking programs on the horizon. For a full list of our programs, you can visit our website and check it out there. So again, thank you so much, Phil, for being with us. Thanks to our audience. And we hope that you all have a chance to come in and see the exhibit, which will be on display through May 30th. Make your reservations online. And then we can see you both in person and again on the screen soon. Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.